The quiet bloom of Sister Abigail. At 29, Sister Abigail was used to silence, both the sacred kind found in midnight prayers and the sharp kind that followed her name in family conversations. She was the woman people stopped asking about at weddings, the one whose name came with a sigh or a subtle shake of the head. In Deeper Life Bible Church, she was seen as a pillar of spiritual strength, but beneath that facade was a woman quietly sinking into depression, buried under the weight of unanswered prayers, judgmental glances, and the ache of being misunderstood. Every Sunday, Abigail sat in the same row in church, dressed in her modest blouse and long skirt, with her scarf tied just right, never too bright, never too plain. She prayed like she was begging for breath, fasted like she could force heaven's hand. And still, no husband, no suitor, only growing suspicion. Her younger sister, Miriam, had married at 24 and was now a bubbly mother of two with a successful husband and a sprawling Instagram following full of bright dresses and scripture quotes. Their family doted on Miriam and conveniently forgot Abigail in conversations about God's timing. Friends stopped introducing her to men. Some simply assumed she must be hiding something, some secret sin, a spiritual bondage, or worse, pride disguised as piety. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't know the loneliness. The nights Abigail pressed her face into her pillow, not to cry but to muffle the sound of her screaming into it. The shame she carried like an invisible scar, wondering if she had failed God or if God had failed her. Even her parents, once proud of her godliness, began to grow impatient. "You're almost 30, her mother snapped one evening. "Are you planning to marry Jesus?" Abigail said nothing. What was there to say? That she didn't know why no man had ever seen her? That she sometimes wished she hadn't taken her faith so seriously, if only for the relief of not being so alone? Then came NYSC. She had delayed her service year after her degree, unsure of what came next. But finally, the posting letter arrived. Yobe State. Her mother nearly collapsed from panic. "Are they not killing people there? You want to go and die single?" But Abigail was done waiting for someone else to give her permission to breathe. She packed her bags in quiet defiance and left, praying not for protection, but for a fresh start. The camp in Yobe was harsh, dusty air, cold nights, noisy bunkmates. But it was also the first time in years that she felt free. No one there knew her history. No one watched her with pity or suspicion. She was just another core member, awkward, quiet, and strangely relieved to blend into the crowd. That was where she met Samuel. He was everything she wasn't: outgoing, talkative, easy with laughter. A mass communication graduate with a beard he liked to stroke when he was deep in thought. He was part of the orientation broadcasting service and always had a joke to share or a word of encouragement. He first noticed her when she sat alone during a CDS meeting. She had dropped her pen, and he picked it up. Their first conversation was brief, but he made her smile. The second time, he asked her name. The third time, he offered her puff-puff under the mango tree behind the parade ground. She laughed that day, a real, unforced laugh, and he stared like he'd discovered something sacred. As days passed, their interactions grew. He didn't flirt. He didn't push. He was just there, slowly becoming her friend. The first man to see her, not as a sermon in a skate, but as a woman with depth, humor, and intelligence. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, they sat together on a bench after devotion. The others had gone. It was quiet, sacred. Abigail turned to him and said, without preamble, "I'm a virgin." He blinked. At 29. She nodded, her fingers clenched tightly in her lap. He said nothing at first. Then, "Okay, that's rare." She nodded again, expecting judgment, sarcasm, or disbelief. Instead, he said, "Thank you for telling me." It wasn't that he fully believed her, at least not immediately. In his experience, women said many things, especially the ones raised in church. But Abigail's tone wasn't proud. It was raw, vulnerable, like someone who had nothing left to lose. Over the next weeks, their bond deepened. They didn't touch, didn't kiss, but they prayed together, laughed, shared their fears. He confessed that he didn't think he'd fall in love during NYSC. She confessed that she'd stopped believing God could write her love story. But love was being written, quietly, humbly, without fireworks, but with deep warmth. 2 months before passing out, Samuel proposed. He didn't have a fancy ring, just a mustard seed of faith and a promise: "I want to honor God with you." Her parents were hesitant. "A man you just met." But after meeting Samuel and seeing his sincerity, they gave their blessing, if reluctantly. They married during their NYSC. A simple court wedding with a small reception held in the Corpus Lodge. No flashy lace, no bridal train, but plenty of laughter and tears. Abigail wore a borrowed white dress and joy like a crown. The first night, Samuel was nervous. He didn't want to rush her, but Abigail was ready, not because of desire, but because of trust. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen, not out of pity or pressure, but love. And when the moment came, Samuel realized she had been telling the truth all along. She was a virgin. He wept quietly, overwhelmed, not just because of her purity, but because of her courage. In a world that mocked virginity, especially in women, Abigail had held fast to her convictions, not knowing if anyone would ever honor them. In the months that followed, Abigail began to bloom. Marriage didn't fix everything. Her depression didn't vanish overnight. But for the first time, she wasn't walking alone. Samuel became not just her husband, but her healer in many ways. He affirmed her when old voices returned. He held her when the nights felt dark again. He never mocked her past or her slowness to trust, but loved her with patience and joy. They eventually relocated. She started a small Christian counseling blog, helping other women who had been shamed for being too spiritual, too pure, or too old. Her story resonated, and her voice became one of healing for others. The same girl who was once pitted at weddings became the woman young women now looked up to, not for being perfect, but for being real, for waiting, for breaking, and for blooming anyway. Sister Abigail was no longer just the girl who had waited till 29. She was the woman who discovered that God's timing wasn't punishment, it was protection. And when she knelt to pray now, it wasn't from desperation. It was gratitude, because finally, someone had seen her and chosen her, not despite who she was, but because of it.